Hello again. So today we are working on the extra topic for Unit 1, which is our absolute value equations and inequalities. So what happens with our absolute value equations is you've got to always remember that there's two parts to it. So just to kind of explain this quickly, I'm going to go on to the back of here. You do not need to write this down. This is just me reminding you a little bit. So absolute value is your distance from 0. So if we take the absolute value of positive 4, we get a 4. If we take the absolute value of negative 4, we get a 4, because the distance from 0 for both positive 4 and negative 4 is exactly the same. You are 4 units from 0. The only thing that happens is that negative sign gives you a direction. So let's say if I'm on my number line, here's my 0. Positive 4 is telling us that we're going to go to the right 4. Negative 4 is telling us we're going to go to the left 4. But ultimately, our distance is still the same. Our distance is still 4 units from 0. So we have to keep that in mind as we're working on our absolute value equations. So with our absolute value equations, what we want to do is we want to first isolate the absolute value sign. So for here, I'm going to subtract that 1 over first. So now my absolute value sign is isolated. That's all I have left on my left side. I have that equals 4 on the other side. So now what's going to happen is we're going to split this into two equations. Because, as I said, two numbers, when I put them in the absolute value bars, can give me a positive 4. Positive 4 inside those absolute value bars gives me a positive 4. And if this were a negative 4, that's going to give me a positive 4. So we create those two equations. So this is saying that inside the absolute value bars can be positive 4, or the stuff inside the absolute value bars can be a negative 4. So then here I'm going to add my 3, and we get two answers, positive 7 and negative 1. And graphing these, all you would do is you would just put 2 dots on your number line, one above negative 1 and one above positive 7, because this is equal. This one's equal to it. There's no shading. There's no greater than, less than. This one is just simply equal. So absolute value equations create two equations. One that gives you the positive version, and then a separate one that gives you the negative version of that number. Let's try that over here with number 2. So again, isolate your absolute value. So I'm going to add 6. That gives me 20. Divide by 4. Gives me a 5. So we have the absolute value of x plus 2 equals 5. So this stuff in here, this x plus 2, can either be equal to a 5. So I could end up getting a 5 inside of there. Or that stuff in there can be equal to a negative 5, because again, a negative 5 will end up giving me what I want when I take my absolute value. So subtract my 2 and I get a 3. Subtract my 2 and I get a negative 7. 3 and negative 7. Those are our two answers. Those are your absolute value equations. You end up getting two answers. End of story. So moving on to our inequalities. So inequalities means that we're going to have kind of like a range of answers here. So same process is still going to happen. You're going to create two equations even though it's an inequality. The first equation is going to be exactly how it is, just without the absolute value bars. So 2x plus 6 is less than 6. When I do the negative 6, though, my inequality sign will flip. It's just like when you divide or multiply by a negative. Your inequality sign is going to end up flipping because you negated it. So in both inequalities, you go ahead, solve for x. So I subtract my 6, divide by 2. Subtract my 6, divide by 2. So these are going to have open circles on 6 and 0. X is less than 0 but greater than negative 6. So I shade in between. My interval notation would be -6 to 0. So what this is showing us that if I plug in a -5 to my original equation, I'll get an answer less than 6. If I plug in -4, -3, -2, -1, any of those numbers when plugged in will get me a value that's less than 6. Let's try again. So just like with our equations, I'm going to isolate my absolute value. So I subtract my 7. So now I'm going to create my two inequalities. So x minus 2 is less than or equal to 3. X minus 2 is greater than or equal to -3. Again, when you do the negative number, your inequality is going to flip because it's like multiplying or dividing by a negative. Add my 2. Add my 2, and I get x is less than or equal to 5, but greater than or equal to -1. So I'm going to shade in between. And our interval notation for this would be brackets -1 to 5. And then our last one, it looks exactly like the last setup. There's really no difference to it. So we're going to follow the same procedures. So I'm going to have the absolute value of -6x is greater than 30 because I'm going to add my 9 over. So I'm going to go ahead and create my two inequalities. So -6x is greater than 30. -6x is less than -30. Because again, the absolute value always has two possibilities, the positive and the negative version. So I'm going to divide by -6, my sign is going to flip. Divide by -6, my sign is going to flip. So I end up with x is less than -5 or x is greater than 5. So on my number line, open circle, shading to the left because it is a less than. Open circle, shading to the right because we're greater than 5. So this one is definitely an or because you can't be in two places at once. So either your value is less than -5, so like -6, -7, or your value is greater than +5, so it's going to be 6 or 7. Practice our interval notation here. Remember parentheses always around our infinity sign, so -infinity to -5, or +5 to +infinity. And then our last one here again, isolate that absolute value sign, so add my 10 first. Divide by 9. So the absolute value of x minus 8 is greater than or equal to 4. So I'm going to create my two inequalities with 4 and -4. And I'm going to solve. So I'm going to add my 8 to both. So we got x is greater than or equal to 12. So closed circle, greater than goes to the right. Or x is less than or equal to 4. So closed circle going to the left of the 4. So for our interval notation, we would use brackets on the 4 and the 12 because those are closed circles. And then parentheses around our infinities. All right, so go ahead, try a few of these. Always, always, always ask for help if you need it.